So, welcome everybody. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to tonight's webinar, a close look at viticulture in Burgundy. My name is Lydia Harrison. I'm a Master of Wine and Educator at the WSET School in London, and I organise their programme of events, of which this is this evening's. And I'm very happy to introduce to you this evening Richard Bampfield, a fellow Master of Wine, who will be hosting this session and asking a lot of your questions, to Christophe Chauvel, who is the Head of Viticulture at Albert Bichot in Burgundy. So I shall pass over to them now without further ado, and Richard can introduce himself in a little bit more detail and take you through how this evening is going to roll. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Lydia. Good evening, everybody, and so pleased you could join us. In normal times, Albert Bichot loves to receive visitors, and every year we receive students from all over the world to come to Burgundy and have a tour around the vineyards, have a tour around the cellars, and really understand what Burgundy is about. Obviously, that's harder at the moment, and it's a real shame. One of the highlights of every trip is the time spent in the vineyard with Christophe Chauvel, who's in charge of viticulture at Albert Bichot. And although very often it's in February or March when Burgundy can be bitterly cold, and it takes real commitment to the cause of education and learning to be out there in the cold, learning about the basics of terroir in Burgundy. But that's what we're there for. And it's a shame we can't do that now. So we thought it'd be an idea to bring this to the virtual context. So I'm very happy to be joined this evening by Christophe Chauvel, who you can see there. Sorry he wasn't there when you signed in. He was just doing what is an essential part of any presentation, making sure he had a glass of wine available, and maybe he'll tell us a bit more about what he's got a little bit later. The way this is, it's an introduction to Burgundy, its geography, its geology, and its terroir. And what we're going to do is start off with something that is maybe slightly unconventional, and I hope Christophe isn't too put out by this. I'm actually going to show a video to begin with, which is a video that Christophe himself prepared and sent me after Christmas. And I thought, this is brilliant. This is lovely. This is exactly what so many wine lovers and people interested in learning about Burgundy would love to see. But I realized not everybody speaks French. And what I thought I'd do is we're going to show the video. It does have subtitles, but I've muted Christophe's commentary. And I will commentate on bits of it as we go through it, and I may occasionally pause it. The video lasts about 12 minutes. With the stops, it's probably going to take maybe nearer to 15 minutes. So it will set the scene for what we want to talk about in this session. And what the subjects that we approach are really up to you, the audience. We will be looking to the Q&A and the chat to inform what you want to hear about with Burgundy and what you would like Christophe to explain. Christophe is highly experienced. He's got experience in biodynamics, in organic viticulture as well, which is what Albert Bichot practice now, and at their domains. And he also, I suppose what I like about his role is that although he's a viticulturalist, he's also really involved in the decisions in the cellar too. It's an aspect of the way Bichot manage their estates that the winemaking team and Christophe and his team in the vineyard work very closely together. Yeah. So there's not a real divide between the two. They are deciding together the decisions both about important aspects like picking dates, but also what's going to happen to the wines when they reach the cellars as well. How they're going to manage the fermentation, temperatures, pigeage, whole bunch, all this sort of thing. These are decisions that the viticultural team take a part in as well. Really interesting approach. Anyway, more of that a little bit later. Christophe, lovely to see you. Thank you very much for joining us. And as I say, in the first part of this, you're going to hear more from me, but don't despair. In the second 3/4 of this, you will hear far more from Christophe. Okay, so I'm going to start. I'm hoping you can all see the screen. I'm going to start this video, and as I say, I'm going to commentate a little bit as we go through. So this is, we all, to my mind, Burgundy, if there's one place in the world which one would go to try to understand terroir, the notion of terroir, it is Burgundy. And when Christophe sent this video to me, I thought this is perfect, because what he's done is he's taken, it's not as if he's comparing Nuit Saint-Georges and Chambolle-Musigny or Vosne-Romanée here. He's just taken one plot in Nuit Saint-Georges, one plot, and in it, they've dug holes so they can analyze the soil. And you'll see that in this video, he talks about the influence of the soils, but also the subtle influences of the climate, and the fact that these things, they are so complex. And we know that Burgundy is already divided into these many different crus and sites. So, you know, so in all the major appellations, you've got the various Premier Cru and Grand Cru, but even within those Premier Cru and Grand Cru, there are divisions, there are separations. And this is a really good example, I think, of helping to understand that. So this is in here a few lovely shots of Burgundy, I think, to set the scene. And you can see the different maps that are available of Burgundy, the maps that also show the, I can't remember the word for the maps that show the topographic, maybe, which show show the height, the contours of the vineyards as well. It's about the geology, it's about the climate, it's about the different soil types, and of course, the vine itself. And we'll talk more about that as we go through this presentation. That looks like Bone Clos des Mouches to me. I don't know if it was Christophe, but that looked like Bone Clos des Mouches just there. Mm-hmm. And these and all of this in Burgundy, as you know, it's protected by UNESCO. I'm just going to pause here very, very quickly. This is a vineyard that I'm embarrassed to say that until about 5 years ago, I had never visited Cru Beaujolais. And I'd never been to Fleury, I'd never been to Morgon, I'd never been to Moulin-Avant, until Albert Bichot bought a domain called Rochegray in Moulin-Avant, and that's what this is. This is Moulin-Avant. Now, we all know what Beaujolais tastes of. It's fruity, it's soft, it's round. Did you believe it was made from vines that look like this? It's like almost a lunar landscape to me. This really barren land with granite very, very close to the surface, both pink and grey granite. And here you've got vines which in most cases are over 80 years old. This is the real Beaujolais. And this is why I think Beaujolais has, for so many of us, become so much more exciting in the last few years, because I think of the respect that the Burgundy has for the old vines. And you will have seen, I'm sure, that Albert Bichot are not alone. Other domains from the Côte d'Or have also bought estates in Cru Beaujolais in recent years. And there's no doubt in my mind that from vines like these, we're going to see outstanding wines in the years to come, as the Côte d'Or producers really understand what's possible from Gamay, from vines like this. But it is, and this is Moulin-Avant, but you go to Fleury, which is next door, and you see vineyards which are equally dramatic. It's an astonishing landscape. And if you haven't been to Cru Beaujolais, I'd really recommend going there. It is chalk and cheese from the sort of flatter, fertile vineyards further south in the Appellation that make most Beaujolais. It's a wonderful area. So, and this is one area you can see we'll be talking about cover crops, turricules, which are the worm casts, and the importance of worms in the soil, the life of a good vineyard soil. So this is really where we come down to the nuts and bolts of what this short video is about. one vineyard in Nuit Saint-Georges, which happens to be the vineyard behind me, you can see on my screensaver, Chateau Gris in Nuit Saint-Georges. And it's built on terraces, and this is right at the top. You can see the chateau there, and the vineyard we're looking at is right at the top of the hill. This, by Burgundy standards, it is a vineyard with altitude. It's right at the top of the appellation. You can see it's quite a spectacular vineyard, a lot of old vines, and we're going up to the top here, where because it's a plot which isn't evenly shaped, it's got contours, it's got slopes, it's not got an even shape, the vines aren't trellised, they're not trained on wires. Here you've got the vines grown in a gobelet system. They are at least in rows, not en foule, but they are. There's Christophe, looking extremely Burgundian, and having a look around the vineyard. This is obviously winter time because there's not much growth here. And you can see this is unlike most vineyards you would see in Burgundy and in France generally, because it's the gobelet system. But they sometimes have to do that where a site is unsuited to trellising. And obviously it's a special skill knowing how to manage vines in this traditional method, the gobelet method. As Christophe is saying, this is the concave shape. A combe is a valley. And this is the combe, the valleys are central to understanding terroir in the Côte d'Or, because they influence the breezes that blow through the vineyards. And if you've got a combe, you are always going to get freshness. That will slow down the ripening of the grapes. And that obviously is a terroir influence. And some sites have more combe influence than others. Here they mow, they don't plough. Obviously, it would be quite difficult to get tractors or even horses maybe between these vines. And you can see how relatively close together they've dug 3 holes to demonstrate the differences in soils. I always smile a little bit when I'm talking about holes in the ground, because I went on a visit to Chile and Argentina a couple of years ago, or Argentina particularly, and we were shown holes in the ground everywhere, what they call calicatas over there, and I think they were trying to lose some of us, I reckon, because everywhere we went we saw holes in the ground, but they are critical to understanding what's beneath the surface. Christophe just then talked of horizon, and the horizon, the horizons, by that he means the different strata of soils that they find in the soils. Obviously, it's not just what's on top that is important, it's what's underneath as well, the subsoils too. And here you can see the different holes they dug. They can see the depth of the vines. They can see the color of the soil. You can tell a lot from the color. Here it's a grayer soil, and some have more or less rocks than others, and that will influence the water retention capacity of the soils and how deep the roots need to go. If the soils retain a lot of moisture, they may not need to go so deep. If they retain very little, the roots may have to go deeper. And also they're looking at the types of rocks here. The limestone, what type of limestone it may be. And here again, a second hole, and you can see that the soil color is different. Okay, now I don't know enough about this to know exactly what that means about the constitution of the soil, but it will have an impact on fertility and drainage. And those are obviously 2 key aspects that influence the growing of the vine. And then in a third profile here, you can see the different colors, the different strata, the horizon that Christophe was talking about earlier. And above all, they're looking for here, they're adding hydrochloric acid to different soils, and this will indicate the amount of calcium that is available in each soil. And that influences a lot. It might influence what grape variety they grow. It might influence what rootstock they choose. It might influence what clone they choose. So calcium is really important. And so understanding the measure of the percentage of calcium in the soil is important. Here you go, he's mentioning about rootstock as well, a really vital element in the equation. And here you go, that sort of, they're looking for as many organisms as possible in the soil. Worms are really important. We may talk later about the relative merits of ploughing and cover crops, because that's a very topical subject at the moment. And one of the keys here is, you saw on the previous slide, there was a plot. I'm just going to pause there very quickly. There was a sorry, my fault. Shouldn't have done that. I'm just going to pause there for a moment. You saw on the previous slide, this one, that there's an unplanted vineyard there. It's really critical, the work they do when the vineyard is lying fallow. So between uprooting the vines and planting them again, replanting, there's really important work that needs to be done. To what extent they turn the soil over, how much they aerate it, how deep they go, what cover crops they grow, which will influence the nutrients and nitrogen available to the vines in future. And they'll plant different cover crops. It's quite sophisticated these days in terms of the different plants they will grow. Some of these will also help encourage certain wildlife in the vineyard, which could predate on some of the wildlife they're trying to avoid. There you go. They've got one of the machines. This is an example of how deep they might aerate the soil. But as Christophe is saying here, these days they prefer to do not too deep, because it's going to influence the terroir. I know we like to think of viticulture as a lovely rural agricultural practice, but science is very helpful in informing the decisions. So there's so much they can learn by digging into the soil's compactness here as well. Les Malconsours is another key domain in the Bichot portfolio. And even within Malconsour, you've got these areas that are different, some that are sandier, some that have got a higher proportion of clay. And that will depend largely on how high up the slope they are. So it's really important to know this is where local knowledge is critical, and really understanding your vineyard. So, and this will influence ultimately the hierarchy in Burgundy as well, the different cru. And all these influences as well. This is why the viticulture team get involved with winemaking as well. That's a great shot, isn't it? Wow. We'll probably talk about frost a little bit later. Scary. And there you have the classic, whoops, oh, I'm not going to end it there. That chart there, the top left, that's the classic picture of Burgundy terroir, or Côte d'Or terroir, that one and the one below, where you can see the slopes of the vineyards, and the heart of the slope, the middle of the slope, is where you're likely to find most of the Grand Cru and Premier Cru, because the middle of the slope has the best exposure to the sun, the best level in terms of soil being fertile, but not too deep and not too much altitude, because obviously the higher you go, the cooler it gets and the less likely it is that the grapes will ripen. So it's the heart of the slopes that is typically regarded as the sweet spot for Premier Cru and Grand Cru Burgundy. The other aspect of that slide, which is really important, the way Christophe explains it, is he sees wine as or the vineyard and the importance of the vineyard as a triptych. There's three elements that are involved. The first is the site and the climate of that site. The second is the vine itself. And the third is man's influence. You can't talk about terroir without talking about the influence of man as well, because so many of the decisions are man-made. How to prepare the land, what rootstock to use, what clone to use, what grape variety to grow, etc., etc. So there are too many decisions that are man-made to ignore that. Here you go. This is actually in Chablis, at Chablis La Moutonne, which is a Grand Cru. Climate change, which I dare say we'll come on to later. I imagine that's Chablis again. And here again, more the soil profiles. This is actually a really important point that he's making there. In so many parts of Europe particularly, they grow a variety of different grape varieties. So take Bordeaux, where they grow many different red grapes, and obviously 3 or 4 major ones. And part of that is to hedge their risks, so that if one grape variety doesn't work in a particular vintage, maybe one of the other ones will work better. And it makes perfect sense where you've got differences in terroir to have different grapes. That's not the way Burgundy has evolved. Burgundy has evolved largely with 2 main grapes, obviously, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. If you've only got those 2 grapes, you haven't got the safety blanket, if you want, of other grapes to save the day. It makes it all the more important to understand the site and the soil that you're playing with. There we go. Let me see if I can, all I need to do now is stop screen sharing. Oops, I'm not sure I can do that. Okay. I think that should. Okay, there we go. Now I have actually lost Christophe for the moment, which probably means that you have as well, which is unfortunate because I'm hoping he's going to be on hand to answer questions here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Q&A and I'm going to, Christophe, can you hear me? Doesn't look like it. I think he may be rejoining because it looked as if he'd possibly frozen. Christophe, can you hear me?
Yes, I heard you. You heard me or not?
Excellent. I can hear you, but I can't see you at the moment.
Yes, I have some problem. I'm more useful in the vineyard than with Zoom.
Okay. Well, look.
I don't know what I have to do to be. If you heard me, that's the mainly thing, I think. But
look, I can hear you now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the Q&A, and I'm going to ask 1 or 2 of the questions that are here. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a question here about climate change and how climate change has changed the profile of white Burgundy in particular. So do you think that white Burgundy stylistically has changed as a result of climate change in recent years? And whether, if so, whether those changes are permanent?
I think, yes. I think the impact of the climate change is evident. For the white or for the red too, the first things for us, when we have to organize the harvest, we have to harvest earlier and earlier. Remember the first time I harvest, it was mainly at the end of September and October, and today sometime it could be at the end of August. Okay, so it's an important thing because the maturation between that different period is different. Okay, when you are in at the beginning of September or the end of October, of the end of September, the length of the day is not the same. The difference between the temperature between the night and the day is different. So the influence is very important for the growth and the maturity. That is the big challenge for us. Okay, so the impact is at the end. If you take the analysis, we don't have the mainly things you see, sugar, acidity, etc. You don't have a big difference, okay? But sometime in the taste it could. So I will say yes, the change of the climate influence the white and the red wine, especially for the date of the harvest mainly.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thanks, Christophe. Christophe, just can you try turning your camera off and on again?
Yeah, yes, I will try. I have something which is I'm not used on my. I have the WSET camera off and on. Okay.
Try that. In the meantime, I will try.
Okay.
I'll just commentate.
Yeah, I don't know
here.
Why.
It's interesting, the question about climate change. I'm actually drinking at the moment a bottle of Bourgogne Aligoté. Now, Bourgogne Aligoté has never been my favorite Burgundy grape. And this is a first vintage that I've tried from Domaines Albert from Albert Bichot. It's delicious. And I just don't think that Bourgogne Aligoté tasted like this even 10 years ago. It's got a ripeness to it and a flesh in the middle palate that I really wouldn't have expected. So it just goes to show that I think there are stylistic changes. I know one of the stylistic changes I find, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, is that white Burgundy seems to be more enjoyable a bit earlier than it used to be. And I think that even at certainly at village level and even at Premier Cru level, the wines can be really enjoyable at 3 or 4 years old, which wasn't always the case before. And so to my mind, there have been some small differences there, certainly. Christophe, that doesn't seem to have worked with the camera.
No, I expect you heard me.
We can still hear you. That's absolutely
fine.
That
is the mainly things. Okay.
That's fine.
Okay.
Can you the question also asked at Chateau Gris, the vines we saw in the plot there, the Chardonnay plot there, the vines have stakes on them. Is that to protect against wind, or is it to keep the shoots upright?
No. The stakes you show is for young plants we have to put. And in that part, we are not able to plow, okay, even with a horse, etc., because this area is too difficult. So we have only to cut the grass, and it's to protect the young plants, okay, when you cut the grass.
All right, perfect. And while we're just talking about climate change and wine styles, a good question's been asked here. I just mentioned that I thought good white Burgundy is easier to drink younger than it used to be. Do you think the wines the white Burgundies being produced now can last the 20, 30, even 40 years that white Burgundies used to in the past?
I will say, it's to my mind, I will say I never practice old white Burgundy. I have some example. I remember I can taste Meursault Genévrier from 30, 40 years old. That I taste and I can appreciate a lot, but I don't expect a lot of time to age it so long. Yes, you can take some bottles to do that, but to my mind, I will say it depends if it's Aligoté, regional, village, Premier Cru, Grand Cru, but in general, for example, a Grand Cru, 10, 20 years, okay, perhaps it would be, perhaps more, but it was not my way of life of to doing the white wine in general. So I will say, for me, the climate change will not change a lot of things for the aging, because I don't expect to have a white wine for 30 or 40 years old. So
okay, all right. Me neither, I must say. I'm lucky to have one or two nice white Burgundies here at home, and even at Grand Cru level, I suspect I'll find good occasions to drink them before they're 10 years old, probably. So anyway, it does come down to personal taste, I guess, as well. There's a question here which is really relevant because, Christophe, we have you visually again.
I try to do something. Okay.
Fantastic. That's terrific.
I was helped with that. Okay.
Okay.
No problem.
There's a question here which is quite a big question.
Yeah.
But you've been instrumental in converting all Albert Bichot's estates to organic viticulture in recent years. What's your view of copper? How much copper has been used in the past? How much is used now? And I mean, is it just a question of, if too much copper has been used in the past, is it just a question of it taking time for the copper to metabolize in the soil?
Okay. Yes, when we talk about organic viticulture, that is the mainly thing we talk about, the copper. I have to say that in the past, we use more copper than today.
Yeah.
We forget that. And that's true that with organic viticulture, the mainly product to use against mildew is copper. So we talk about copper a lot. I will say that it's a problem, that's correct. And people, to talk about, it's a good thing, because even if you are not in organic viticulture, you have to think about it's important. Our challenge today is to find the way to reduce more and more the copper. That's why we can use plants. That's why we use many other information, like the weather, like things like that. We use many tractors which are more well equipped to spray in a better condition, in an efficient condition. That is many things, but I think it will impossible to forget the copper. It will be impossible. We can reduce, we can use it as best as possible, but it was impossible not to use it. Okay, and for a small story, we talk about the copper. The first time I heard it, it was when I studied in Bordeaux, because you have, even if in Burgundy it's not good thing to have copper in soil, but the soil in Burgundy is more basic, okay, and the soil in Bordeaux is more acid, and the copper is more dangerous in acid soil than in basic soil. First things. Second things, in Bordeaux you have a lot of Sauvignon, and the Sauvignon, with the kind of aromas, they don't like the copper, because it's thiol and copper is not good. So that's why they talk about a lot about copper in Bordeaux, but they are right. You have to take care and to try not to use as less as possible, but not to use it, it's impossible for me.
Yep. Okay. Do you think, as a matter of interest, I know people are talking about other biocontrols of mildew.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that science will come up with organic alternatives to copper?
It will not be alternative. It will be a complement,
okay,
but not alternative. No, not possible, because the copper, why we use copper in organic viticulture, if you compare with what we say or called classical viticulture, okay, it's a product which is a contact product, only on the, not inside the plant, okay?
Yeah.
And but a lot of products which are used against mildew in conventional and classical viticulture, the problem is the mildew adapt to the product,
yeah,
and it transforms it. and after the product is not efficient. That is a big problem. With copper, it's a mineral product, and the mushroom, the mildew, for example, with enzyme, is not able to transform to adapt. So the copper will be always efficient. On the contrary of other products, which are more able to use, because inside the plants, against the rain is better, etc. You can keep a long time. But in fact, today, when you use that kind of product, they say, this year, no more than 4 times, because we are afraid that it will change. That is a big problem we have in classical viticulture. That's why we are like dependent from chemical industry. That's true. I don't want to say it's bad thing, but some problem we can have with products which are efficient and not. The mainly kind of product which is like that is again botrytis. Okay, during the 89, at the beginning of the 80, we saw so many rots, even if the people use product again botrytis, and they say yes, because the botrytis is a mushroom which is the most able to transform and to be able to adapt to the product you put. Okay, that is.
Okay, thank you, Christophe. While we're talking about the vineyard, there are questions about everything here, but while we're still talking about the vineyard, there's been one question about hail. Is it still practiced to seed clouds with silver iodide to protect the vineyards from hail? Is that still going on with the rockets?
Yeah, I think against hail, we have not a lot of things. It was used in the past because you can go in some museum and you see some old cannon. Okay, so it was not a new thing. In some area that it was used with a plane because it's to put iodure d'argent just in the center of the storm. It's the better efficient things. Okay, iodure d'argent. So I think it's yes, it's a thing which, but it's not perfect. I'm not sure that to protect the vineyard, like you can see some example, I can understand the people who do that, because in fact, when you have hail in 12, 13, 14, you say I have to find a solution or to reduce the damage. But it could be a solution for when you have trees for apple, etc., because the density is very large. But in fact, when you have the density we have in the vineyard, you have so many protection. You have to think if you are in organic production, you spray some products which are contact products, and it was not efficient as without that kind of protection, because it can stop it. Okay, you have many things, so that's why I don't believe, unfortunately, with that way of again the hair.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you find with the move to organics, when you're in the vineyards, because I know that many of the vineyards were managed organically even before Albert Bichot declared it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see any change in the health of the vine, in the health of the vines in the vineyards? What's the physical evidence? Is there any physical evidence of a change in the vineyard?
Difficult to say, in fact, because when you observe it, the look is not so evident between. But it's not only with the growth of the vine, because it's difficult to say that vine is the behavior against dryness or things like that is better or not. I don't know. What is important is the first, before organic viticulture, is how you manage the soil. That is the first thing, because that is, if you talk about a glass of wine, you have to talk about enology, you have to talk about viticulture, and you have to talk about many things, but you have to talk about the soil, because in the soil you have the relation between the terroir, the climate, and the plants. And that is for me the first things. And that is the first things I saw at the beginning of the 80s in Burgundy. I was surprised because most of the time at the end of winter, you have many people who use weeding agent. So, and more people come back to plow. And that was a big difference. It's not perfect. There is nothing which is perfect, okay? But you have, for example, you can have problem with on the slope with if you plow with the water, it can take off the ground or many things like that, okay? But again, dryness, it's better to plow than to use weeding agent because the roots go a little bit deeper. Sometimes some people say the roots of the vines go very deep. You can have that, but in fact, it's like human people. When the roots find what they need, water and what to eat, they stop. They don't have to go deeper. But if you practice weeding agent, you know that you can see that the roots are more on the top than if you plow. So that is the first thing which is very important, to work with the soil. And then to the behavior of the plant, if it's organic or not, difficult to say. We expect many things because with organic things, we don't want to make permanent assistance. We want to help because we know that the plant is able to against some disease or against some problem. And we look for something which can help the plants to against something like that by herself. That is.
Absolutely. I like that the aim is to help the plant combat disease on its own without human help.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense, which evolution does show is possible. There's I like this question. We all understand that in Burgundy that generally speaking, the soils with a higher limestone content are favored for Chardonnay over Pinot Noir. Can you explain why?
I used to say, to simplify, when we talked about the relation between the soil and the kind of soil with the kind of wine, not the variety, but the kind of wine. To simplify, when I taste, I used to think about when you feel a sensation of roundness, fatness, powerful in a wine. Most of the time, it's come from because the quantity of clay, because exposition, which is very sunny. But if you find something which is more like not like a sphere, but more like a line, it becomes because the limestone, because altitude, because comb, because other exposition. So that is, to simplify, the mainly things which could influence not only the growth of the vines, but the style of the wine. Okay, and that's why all the winemaker, it's very important to know where it's come from, because you know that kind of wine, you will not expect to have something like a line because it's more on a heavy soil, on a lot of clay. But you know that wine is more in the vineyard is more in altitude, is more on you have more limestone on it, etc. You say yes, I can have some minerality style, and you will adapt the vinification, the aging, the bottling for all to respect that difference, because we can't change it. It's not possible. It's where Alberic has last day we people some ask what is the style of Albert Bichot, and my answer was it is a style from where it's come from. That is
a good answer. And I should add there, and look, this isn't meant to be a publicity for Albert Bichot, particularly this evening, but Albert Bichot have, I think, 6 different domains now, and each domain has its own team managing the domain, so that team really gets to know the vineyard, they get to know the vines, they get to know the soils, they understand what they're doing. And that's really important, that you have dedicated teams in each place, really understand the place the grapes come from.
If I can add a small example, we talk about Chardonnay in Chablis, we talk about Chardonnay in Côte d'Or. It's nearly 1 hour by car, okay, but it's completely different.
You drive faster than I do, Christophe.
Okay.
Maybe you've got a helicopter.
Yes, well, 1 hour and a half, okay.
That's very true. A good question here. In the video, you showed the 3 different holes that you dug and the different soils in them. So, okay, so you have that knowledge now of the different soils and horizon. So what do you do with that? How does that influence the way you manage the vines? And does it influence when you pick the grapes, for instance?
First, it was more to understand why the behavior of that part of the plant is like that, what kind of grapes we have. Because the soil is not the only thing. You see, you have, it was concave, like here you see. So exposition is different. And I know each time on the right side, it's more sunny, and sometimes it's more sur-mature, and the other side is less mature. What we have to think is the mix of that. And it is the mainly idea of the film. It is to think that when you are in a place which is well known, it's not only one style, okay? You have many things, details inside. It could be different plants, different age, different rootstock, different soil, different different exposition, if you have a thing like that. So our job is, before the harvest, to say, yes, we have to think about the mix of it, not only one part, etc. That is the mainly problem. And that was something which is very interesting in our job, but not easy, in fact. And so to answer your question, you have some evidence. You can see one part, the roots, it's not very deep because it is on the rock, okay? The other part is deeper. So I can understand that most of the time, if you are on the rock, I can understand the plants is more difficult to grow. It's simple, like that, because if you have more earth, dry earth, wetness, etc., humidity is better for the plant. So I can understand why that plant on the right side grows, or in the middle grows in a better condition than in the left and in the right. That is something like that. Okay.
Okay, so it's just increased understanding all the way through. There are so many questions about climate change here. Is one which is it's a good one. Bordeaux, as you know, is looking at new grape varieties and has authorized new grape varieties to be planted for Bordeaux Rouge and Bordeaux Supérieur. Is Burgundy looking at any new grapes?
Yeah, when you talk about the climate change everywhere in the world, but for example in Burgundy, what people say in general, we have perhaps to allow irrigation, which is forbidden. Okay, if you have dryness like we have in some last vintage. The second thing is to say, yes, we have to use different plants. Perhaps Syrah or things like that, okay? Why not? I don't say that in the future you will have it, but in fact, I think today we have some way to have answer to what, to the climate change. Yes, it would be difficult if you want to be sure to produce big quantity each year. Yes, you can practice irrigation. The problem is to find the water, where you have to find the water, okay? It's not like in some area, like for example, in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, or you can take the water in Petit-Rhône, etc. Okay, but in Burgundy, you have many places, it's not possible even to bring to bring many water. The only time you are allowed to use water, it was for the young plants, but the young plants don't produce, okay? But the roots are on the top. And when you have dryness, that is the young plants who suffer the first, which suffer the first. So irrigation, yes, why not? But I will be sure I will never see it in my life. To change the plants, we have many kinds of Pinot, we have many kinds of Chardonnay. And I think we have especially to study what kind of Chardonnay is more able, and what kind of rootstock first, the rootstock. Because yes, in Burgundy we don't have many choice because habitude. But perhaps you have to study different rootstock, perhaps some rootstock which are used in south of France, but not usually in Burgundy. Sometimes it could be good, sometimes not, okay, because you have different things. The relation between the plants and the rootstock is not so evident, but why? So I think we have many things to do before to change the plants.
I thought you might say that, and I totally agree. I think we sometimes forget that in most of Northern Europe, wine producers spent the best part of the 20th century helping vines ripen the grapes more quickly. And everything was aimed at ripening the grapes more quickly. Some of those actions can be reversed in terms of selection of rootstock, in terms of selection of clone, planting densities, canopy management, everything else. So there's a lot that can be changed there. Do you think, and I mean, it's such a pertinent question, but with climate change, it does mean that certain appellations, which before might have been not so highly regarded, like Haute Côte de Nuit, Haute Côte de Beaune, Santenay, Fissin, do you think that these appellations are going to gain in prominence over the coming years?
I live in the Haute Côte, so I know a little bit of the problem, okay, in a small village in Haute Côte. So that is the fact. People talk about a lot of, especially when you have dryness or hotness, about the effect, which is very important, of the altitude. That's why we talk about Haute Côte, for example, because altitude, you have between 300, 350 meters, etc. If you control, and if you compare with the Côte, which 220, 200, etc. But you have the slope. So yes, we can think about that, but I will say it's not the only reason to have a Grand Cru with the altitude. You have other things. So I think, yes, the impact is sure, especially when you have the last vintage in 18, 19, 20, we saw the difference, that's true. And we saw sometimes more minerality in a vineyard which is more in altitude than but it's not the only thing. You have many other things to give a great wine. So but that's true that some what I learned at school several years ago, not a lot, but several years ago, it was some rules can change. You say yes, that kind of exposition is better than that kind, but perhaps it will change. Not possible. Not possible.
Yeah. Christophe, I think we do need to talk, because there's been fairly dramatic pictures of attempts at frost prevention in Burgundy and across France in recent weeks. How do you see that progressing? Because it's obviously becoming a more regular event.
Yeah.
It sounds as if Burgundy has been badly hit.
Yes.
In some cases this year.
Especially for the white, especially for Chardonnay.
Yeah, because it buds earlier than Pinot Noir.
Yes, exactly. Yep. Exactly. So, and Chardonnay is a little bit less vigorous than Pinot Noir. Okay. For example, you know, you have what we practice in Pinot Noir. It's more important than in Chardonnay. It's what we call debudding, because you have two buds, okay? And Pinot Noir, you have a lot, two buds, which are able to grow together. And but in Chardonnay, you have less. So if you have problem with frost with one bud, you don't have a lot of other birds to replace it, okay? And if you have, most of the time, they are not able to have many branches, not a lot. That's why. So yes, it's a big problem. It's too early to have a very precise idea, especially for the vintage, because we are not on the vintage. We have May, June, July. We can have hail, we can have disease, we can have bad condition for the flowering. So, but that's true, especially with Chardonnay, even in Chablis, Côte d'Or, Mâconnais, etc. The damage is very, very important for me. Yeah. And for Pinot, it's different. Where you have big damage, some part. Sometimes the damage is less important, but we have damage. But I believe more in Pinot because the growth of the Pinot was, as you said earlier, so it was more resistant against the frost. But that kind of frost, I think, I'm not sure that some old wine growers, which is always alive, can talk about that kind of frost, which was so large, so intense, several days, and with the impact, especially with Chardonnay. I don't see. Even if Chablis, for example, they are more used against frost than we used to have.
Absolutely.
Okay. That we talk about. We have two teams not far away from 1.5 hour. Okay, by car with Chardonnay, but it's they have the culture because in the past it was more often to have in Chablis. That's why they spray. They have all the. It's another culture. But even in Chablis, except for perhaps for the when they use electric wires. Or when they use spray water, they can reduce a little bit the damage. When you use the candles, no, not a lot, because it was what we call a black frost. It was not a white frost, and there is a big difference between white frost is mainly things we have in spring, okay, and you have two levels of temperature. You have underground, which is cold, and on the top, which is more higher, okay? That's why some people want to use helicopters, you want to use propellers or things like that to mix the two air. That year, it was a black frost. Black frost, it was the temperature on the top, on the ground, not a big difference.
I think this is the difference in English. We make the difference between a ground frost and an airborne frost.
Exactly.
Does that make sense? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Christophe, if money was no object, if you didn't have to worry about money, and based on your experience in Chablis, do you have a preferred method of frost prevention?
I think the problem with, I will say the water. To spray.
The water, the spray.
Yeah. But because, yes, electricity, it will be nuclear electricity, okay? Many people want to use electricity for the car, for the etc. Okay, so I would say the problem was, it was the problem this year, that the frost, it takes a long time, and it begins earlier in the night, and it finished at 9 or 10. So they have to use, and several days. So they have to use a lot of water. And at the end, they were afraid to miss water. Because they take water in a Lac de Bains.
Yep.
I think they can take in Serein, I don't know. But in Lac de Bains, sure. But they see the level of the lake.
Absolutely.
That is. So that is a limit. Another thing, when the plants grow because the growth of the vine is more and more earlier. It's one of the impact of the change of the climate. And so the problem that the time when you can have frost is always the same. That's why that is a big problem. If the vine grows at the middle of April and it begins and you have frost until middle of May, okay, it's nearly 1 month. But today, sometimes it becomes earlier than the middle of April. So the length, the risk is more important for a long time. And the problem is, if the vines grow very earlier, when it grows like that, it's not possible to use water because the ice which protects the plants, we can break the plants too. So we have a limit. The same with electric wire. If the plant is like that, with the electric wire, the hotness from the electric is not sufficient for the other part. Okay, there is nothing perfect, but I can understand. We try because more and more we have the problem. We have to find a solution, not to prevent, but to try to reduce.
Yeah. Okay. It's such a difficult area, isn't it? And they're dramatic pictures that we see of the Côte d'Or with all the candles, and yet at the same time we see the pictures in the morning with all the smoke over the vineyards and everything else, and it's not a happy sight in so many ways.
Especially when you know that it's not efficient in that
absolutely.
case. It could be in some case, but not in that case.
If only we could do with the causes rather than the symptoms, but that is a much bigger subject. There's a question here I really like because it's a commercial question and it's very important. So over the last sort of 40 or 50 years, a lot of producers have made a point of green harvesting in order to restrict the yield and to hit the legal regulatory yields for both Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Do you think that with climate change and maybe with organics and maybe with modern understanding, do you think the current legal limits for yields are correct, or could they change in future?
I can't answer with a precise answer because I don't know the future, but I think the kind of yield we have today is correct. I think it's not excessive, it's not too low, it's not excessive. I gave you an example. Some people can ask the question, yes, organic viticulture, you produce less than classical viticulture. No, you produce the same. That's true if you talk about cereals or things like that, with a huge yield. Yes, a man which is in organic production will produce less than the classical, okay, but not in viticulture. I think the yield we have are not so bad, and to practice green harvest is not very new, in fact.
No.
When you talk about all wine growers in the 18th, it was impossible to practice green harvest because some people are afraid about frost. They say, yes, we produce more this year, but perhaps next year we have frost. Okay, that is it. So that's why today it's more in the new generation, it's more in your mind to practice green harvest. But in fact, you have to, it's not a simple decision. You have to count to be sure. Because, for example, you can have many grapes, but if you have a big dryness during the maturation, you will have not juice inside.
Absolutely.
You have many grapes, but not juice. So
that's key, and I know that's something you've seen in recent vintages, that the volume of juice you've had from the berries has been disappointing.
Exactly. So,
yeah.
In the case in the 18, for example, with Pinot Noir, we harvest some. Now, what I used to say that to choose the date of the harvest, if you want to do the correct job as better as possible, is more and more difficult. And the last three vintage, for example, 18, we begin here, we go here, we stop, we come back here, etc. With the Pinot Noir in 18, when we come back in the same area, we can lose nearly 20% because it was very hot. It disappeared. Okay, that is a thing. Yes, we have to adapt. That is.
It's a big figure, isn't it? That's a big reduction in volume.
Yeah.
Apologies for the favoritism here, but there's a question from Richard Stove in Bradford, who I'm pretty sure I went to school with. But anyway, Richard, I'll leave that to you to tell me whether that's true or not. Christophe, do you think you've worked in Bordeaux? I know that you taste wines from all over the world. Do you think that in the last few years, Burgundy has learned anything from practices elsewhere in the world with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay?
First things, the Pinot Noir is not a very easy variety. You have many varieties which are easier than Pinot Noir. Okay, that can explain that it's Chardonnay is more. You can find more Chardonnay in the world than Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
Okay. And because it's white, because it's Chardonnay, but Pinot Noir is more complex variety, and that's why I like it. But sometimes Pinot Noir, okay. So I don't think you would say the health of the Burgundy. I will show to be understood the question. You would say,
but the question is whether Burgundy, a lot of Burgundy winemakers these days, they spend time working vintages in California or Australia or New Zealand, and some Burgundy companies own producers in Oregon or elsewhere. Yeah. What do you think Burgundy has learned from them?
I think everywhere you have to go, you will learn something. But what I can say that I'm very lucky to meet many winemakers from California, Chile, South Africa, Australia, which came to us and we discussed, and some of them, they produce Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Yeah. Each time they are very surprised to we are able to have a kind of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay which could be sometimes very mineral, very precise, very not so fat as they used to have. I don't want to say that it's like everywhere in the world, because you have some place you can have the same results like in Burgundy, but a lot of times you have Chardonnay and Pinot Noir which are planted in some area which are too hot, and the style I would say is good wine, very good wine, okay, but you don't have the freshness that you can find in Burgundy most of the time.
Okay, all right, thank you. Christophe, look, there are lots of questions. I'm conscious we've already gone over the hour, but there's almost 300 people still participating. Lydia, are you happy if we carry on? And Christophe, are you happy to carry on for a few minutes still?
Yeah, fine from me.
I think so. He's still there.
I have one bottle for a long time.
There's a question here which I think is a really good one. It's one that I'm really interested in, because to my mind, Beaujolais has changed, and particularly Cru Beaujolais has changed quite a lot over the last 20 years. And the question here is how you approach the vinification of Gamay in Beaujolais. Do you vinify it in a traditional Beaujolais style, or do you vinify it in a Côte d'Or style?
It's a mix. It's a mix of both. Because, for example, if you take the example of pigeage, punching, I love the word punching, no. Sorry. When you, the Gamay is, the skin of the Gamay is completely different from the skin of the Pinot. So you have to adapt. So to practice pigeage, it could be a good thing with the Gamay, but not too much. And that is a big change with the the traditional Beaujolais vinification to practice pigeage or things like that. To keep some stem, but not 100%. It depends. So, yeah, I think we have to. You have a kind of evolution, especially in the Cru du Beaujolais, because more and more people they feel, yeah, it's a cru, and you can compare a Cru du Beaujolais with a cru from the côte. You have to take care of that. That kind of wine is able to age. Like you take Moulin à Vent. I was lucky to taste some old Moulin à Vent, and I look for it. It's from Côte de Beaune, Côte de Nuit, no, Moulin à Vent. So you have to take care and to vinify it, like to extract what you need to age the wine. But you have to take care. The extraction is not the same like the Pinot. So, but I think the big evolution.
I like the answer, Christophe, because I know that reflects Bichot's attitude generally, which is that nothing is systematic.
Yeah.
Everything depends. It depends on the vintage. It depends on the ripeness of the grapes. It depends on the health of the grapes.
I used to say in analogy in a wine, you have only one rule, but you have many exceptions.
It's so true. Oh gosh, the joys of being a winemaker,
Yeah,
and the decisions that have to be made on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's why we have. I have to talk about. I'm here, okay, but I'm very lucky to be with a very good. You talk about the team at the beginning, but it's very important. It's a team. Each people bring his own experience. We discuss and we learn each time, because each day we wake up, we learn something new. But that is very important to have a team. Some people say only one man can decide for all. Yes, perhaps some, but I'm not able.
That's very good. I like the attitude and the humility. In terms of clones, I know that from the time we've spent together in the past that you like to plant a variety of clones. You prefer not to have a single clone per vineyard. You like diversity.
Clone and Marsal. Clone and Marsal, both.
Absolutely, Clone and Marsal. Do you, but are, again, coming back to climate change and the new conditions, are different clones being developed which help you in your decisions with regards to clonal selection?
Sure, it will be possible, because some clones, at the beginning of, at the end of the 70s or the 80s, the job was to find something which is, because we have perhaps too much production, we need sugar because we are not powerful enough. So we look for clones which are able to have very concentrated things, etc. And we forget some clones which are perhaps not so good. But today, the mix of each could be perhaps a good thing.
Yeah.
That is, I like in the life, you need high people, to small people, big people, fat thing, etc. And one vine which is able to bear 6 or 7 grapes, one vine which is able only to bear 3 grapes, some grapes which are bigger, some grapes which are smaller. That is the mix which is interesting. And that is the better way to be able to adapt.
Absolutely. No, very good. Oh gosh, there's so many questions here. I don't know where to start, Christophe. Trunk disease. How do you fight? What percentage of the vineyard do you lose each year to trunk diseases, and how do you fight it?
I have some problem with my video. It's no problem. I was the sound I expect. The disease, the structure. Sorry, I was perturbed by the video. Yeah, the question was exactly.
It's about trunk disease, the diseases of the vine itself.
Yeah.
Like eutypios and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Dieback. What percentage of the damage? What percentage of the vines do you expect to lose each year, and how are you fighting it?
In general, you know, when you have two choice when you manage a vineyard, you have to, when you decided to replant all the vines or to replant only the plants who die. Okay. In general, I consider between 1.5% is logical.
Yeah.
When you have more than 2%, you have a problem. It could be frost, it could be esca, it could be TPOs, it could be many things. Okay, so the average 1.5% each year. Yes. So when you have 1 hectare, 10,000 plants per hectare is 150 plants per hectare.
Yeah.
It's,
and is there anything you can do to fight it, or do you just have to accept it?
Today we have to accept it. We have some disease, we can we look for solution, okay, but today we have some diseases we don't have the answer, and especially esca, for example. Yes, we know that some things can increase the risk of esca, or okay, but the weather is important too. Some vintage we don't have a lot of esca, some vintage we have a lot, even if we have the same practice. So the influence of the weather is important. But in fact, against that kind of disease, we have no real solution. And more and more it's important, more and more it becomes a problem. Okay. And I don't talk about some disease I don't know today. Perhaps we discover in the future. Okay. Some virus or things like that, like you have with some trees, or you have new disease we discover. Some disease which perhaps come back from the past, we forget them. Some disease which are well known in some country, but not here, but they come. Okay, when you talk about, for example, Drosophila, Suzuki, it was new for us in 2014. Okay, it was, but perhaps we'll have more and more. We don't know. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, sorry, I'm just sending 1 or 2 answers here. Christophe, I mean, people always are interested in looking at the new vintage coming on stream and what we can expect. How's the 2000 what are your thoughts on the 2020 vintage? And it's too early to talk about 2021, but can you tell us a bit about the 2020 vintage?
I think I will compare last in a recent Zoom. I will say that when I talk, I have to talk about the 19, but I say when I talk about the 19, I feel obliged to talk about the 18, the 19, and the 20, because in each case we have warmness, we have dryness, not at the same time, not with the same effect, not with the same yield. Like 18 was higher than 19 and 20, but I say that that kind of vintage like 19 and 20, for me at the beginning, it was difficult to appreciate, because when you have something which is too much concentrate, because the yield was very low, and you have dryness, you have not a lot of juice, a ratio between the solid part and liquid part, which is not very good to produce, and it's more difficult. The aging is more and more important for that kind of vintage. We have big solid part if you compare with the liquid part. Okay. So at the beginning of the 19, I was a little bit disappointed if I compare with the 18. And after the aging, I say, yes, I appreciate a lot that kind of vintage. It's different, but I appreciate it. But we need that kind of aging, very adapt. I will say the same for the 20. 20 and 19, I have the same opinion at the beginning, but I believe in it, but I know the aging is very, very, very important.
Okay, interesting. So we're just going to have to taste and make up our own minds. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And there's one, I'm going to wind up in a minute. I'm sorry to all of those whose questions we haven't got round to. But a question that I do like, and I think Christophe will like as well, and we should finish on a bubbly note. One of the questions was, Crémant de Bourgogne has suddenly, in the last few years, has become more popular again, and Albert Bichot make an extremely good example. What are your views of Crémant? What challenges does it pose you as a viticulturist in terms of preparing the grapes for Crémant, and how do you see its future?
Okay, yes, I am very fond of Crémant Bourgogne. I think it's a product which the quality increased a lot from the last 20 years. And I will not talk about champagne, okay? I will not make the mistake to go to. But I think we can have very, very good products and different kind of products. But we produce some Crémant, that's true, not on the estate, okay? Because when you produce Crémant, you must manage the vineyard nearly like you manage in Champagne, mainly for the yield, things like that. The kind of variety, because you need juice, you need something which is not too much too mature. Okay, you have to take care. So when you planted a vineyard to produce Crémant, you have to think Crémant first. You don't have to think white wine. Okay.
Yeah.
That is.
No, it's a really good point, and sorry, I'd forgotten that you don't grow grapes for Crémant yourself.
No,
So
we have some contracts, okay, where we take the grapes and we press and we make the juice, the wine for the champagnisation.
Yeah.
But we don't have on the vineyard. No.
That's really interesting. And of course, in Champagne, they've got the opposite situation where they're used to growing grapes for sparkling. And now, because they're making red wines for rosé and Coteaux Champenois, the still wines from Champagne, are becoming fashionable again. Now they're having to plant vineyards to make still wine. So my understanding is they're planting Dijon clones of
because
that sort of thing.
Never forget one of the mistakes we made at the 70s, especially with Pinot Noir. It was when we talk a lot about sélection clonale. It was to use clones which were selected in Champagne first, because they are more. And that kind of clone produce more. That's why we have a big job for many people to look for other kind of clones which are more adapted for the quality and the kind of wine we expect in Burgundy. That was a big change between the 80s and today.
Yeah, absolutely. Christophe, one final question, which I should have asked earlier because it's an important one, but I think a lot of us would be really interested to know. We saw pictures earlier of ploughing and pictures of cover crops. Can you just clarify, for the long-term health of a vineyard and with organic viticulture, do you have a preference between cover crops and ploughing and the balance between the two?
I think we need both. If I talk about cover crop, this is because when you stop weeding agent, we talk about plowing, logical, and plowing is a good thing, but it's nothing is good, perfectly good, and the bad thing is it costs a lot, takes long times. You have to know big knowledge because each soil don't react in the same way. The weather don't help you, etc. It's not necessarily good for the life in soil. Even if we take care not to go too deep, but I'm not sure it's good for the life in soil if you practice too much. So we have to think about things which we can manage both cover crop, plowing, to plow less, perhaps, to give something in the soil which is good for life, for the soil, for worms or small mycorrhizas and things like that. So that's why we need both. But the big problem is we have many things we don't know about that kind of practice. And the big problem is here, the density. With high density, we have competition between all the kind of weeds you use and the vines, especially if you have dryness. Okay, so that's why we have to take care. It's easier to practice that kind of things, for example, in Alsace or in vineyards where you are planted 2 meters. Okay, but with high density, you can have a big problem very quickly. So that's why you have to take care and combine both plowing and cover crop.
So, Christophe, look, I'm so grateful. Your answer to that question epitomizes, to my mind, your approach to viticulture, which is that it is not black and white, that actually a combination of so many factors can help you achieve the aims that you want.
Exactly.
And a combination of plants, a combination of science and knowledge and experience. And that is, if there's one thing I've learned from the time I spent with you on freezing mornings in Eschezeux over the years, it is this fact that there's so much to learn and there is no one single answer. It is a question of experience, understanding, humility in the face of nature, and accepting that there's always more you can learn and more you can do. I love that. Christophe, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you to the audience, a huge audience, and to the many of you who've joined us right till the end. Really grateful. And I'm sorry I didn't get round to all the questions. They were all valid, and hopefully you'll find answers in other ways to those. And also thank you to, it's quite clear from the chat, a big thank you to Lydia and WSET Global, because these sessions, wow, what a following. And it shows how valuable they are to wine students all over the world. So Lydia, WSET, keep up the good work. Thanks so much. And from Christophe and myself, good night, and keep drinking.
I will add something, Richard.
Yes.
You heard. I will make big thanks to Richard, because I appreciate a lot when he comes in Burgundy. I appreciate the way he's feeling, his knowledge, his pedagogy, and it's always a second way to see the vineyard and to understand Burgundy wine, especially with the film. I discovered the film with your perfect English is okay. Okay.
Film is great, and it's the film that set all this off. So thank you, Christophe. Thanks for your initiative, because you're a busy man. And I know that now, or hopefully soon, when frost is out of the way, you will probably be out in the vineyards doing the bourgeonnage on the buds of the Pinot Noir in order to ensure that you've got a good crop this year. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks to everybody. Okay, see you soon.